The Italian man says, "Last week my wife and I had great sex. I rubbed her body all over with olive oil. We made passionate love, and she screamed for 5 full minutes at the end." The Frenchman boasts, "Last week when my wife and I had sex, I rubbed her body all over with butter. We then made passionate love and she screamed for 15 minutes. The old Jewish man says, "Well, last week my wife and I had sex too. I rubbed her body all over with schmaltz, we made love, and she screamed for over 6 hours. The Italian and Frenchman were stunned. They asked, "What could you have possibly done to make your wife scream for 6 hours? The old Jewish man replies, "I wiped my hands on the bedsheet." Two old friends caught up for lunch. Jake and Oliver hadn't seen each other for over 20 years. "How have you been?" Oliver asked. "I've been good," Jake said, ordering from the menu. "I'm married with 2 great kids. Work is a bit dull, but it pays the bills. How about you? How have you been?" Oliver puffed up his chest in pride. "Well, I've been great. I've spent the last 20 years living the dream. I moved out from living with my parents early. I was lucky to be in a privileged position where I didn't need to find work. I've spent most of my time with hobbies like reading and going to the gym. Money hasn't been too much of an issue for me either. And the action. I could hardly get laid back when we used to hang out, but now I've been getting laid consistently, every single day." Jake couldn't help but listen and feel a bit envious about Oliver living the good life for the past 20 years. The two friends parted after lunch. Later that night, Jake was having dinner with his family when the phone rang. "Excuse me, is this Jake?" a voice asked. "Yes, it is. How can I help you?" Jake replied. "I'm trying to track down Oliver. You're listed as one of his contacts, and one of the last people he's seen," the voice continued. "Okay," Jake asked, confused. "Can I ask who this is?" "This is Oliver's parole office." A sign on a restaurant window says, "If you order it and we don't have it, you instantly win $1 million. A man walking by notices the sign and walks in the restaurant and sits down at the table with a smirk on his face. The waiter asks what he will be having, and the man says, "I will have white rhinoceros stew, please." The waiter comes out with a boiling hot bowl of exactly what the man ordered. The man is taken by surprise, but he eats the stew and pays for his very expensive meal. He leaves angrily. The next day, he comes back and sits at the table with a smirk on his face again. He tells the waiter, "Today, I will have bullet ants stuffed with dolphin meat." The waiter leaves and quickly comes back after a few minutes with exactly what the man ordered. The man, surprised again, eats his meal angrily, pays, and leaves. The next day he comes back and sits at the table and tells the waiter, "Today I will have a lactating mermaid breast sandwich." A few minutes go by and the waiter comes out holding 2 massive duffel bags with the $1 million. The man, overcome with excitement, says, "I knew it! You don't have a mermaid breast." The waiter tells him politely, "We actually have it, sir. It's just that we ran out of bread." The spoon in a waiter's pocket catches the customer's attention. The customer asks, "Why do you have a spoon in your pocket?" To which the waiter replies, "It's part of a new program to save time the restaurant is doing. If I drop a soup spoon, I can quickly replace it with the spoon in my pocket and then switch the dirty one out next time I'm in the kitchen." The customer is visibly impressed. He then notices something else. He asks, "Is that the same reason you have a ketchup bottle in your apron?" The waiter says, "Exactly." The customer says, "One last question. Why is there a string coming out of your fly?" The waiter explains, "That string is tied to my penis. When I pee, I just have to unzip and then give it a tug. That way, I save valuable time without having to wash my hands." The customer says, "I see. But how do you get your penis back in your pants without touching it?" The waiter replies, "I don't know about the other waiters, but I use my spoon." A North American elk walks into a pizzeria and sits at an empty table while he waits for the waiter. The waiter hands him a menu and the elk ponders for a bit. He's not really in the mood for pizza, so he narrows it down to pasta. The elk is finally ready to order, so he calls for the waiter. The waiter asks him what he wants, and the elk hesitates for a second. Locomotive. The waiter is puzzled. What? Land Rover. Sir, that's not on the menu. Lake Michigan. The waiter is unsure what to say. Frustrated, the elk brings his leg up on the table to point out what he wants on the menu. This is what I want. Sir, you don't have any fingers. I can't tell what you're pointing at. Just give me the damn spaghetti. A bus full of nuns falls off a cliff and they all die. They arrive at the gates of heaven and meet St. Peter. St. Peter says to them, "Sisters, welcome to heaven. In a moment I will let you all through the pearly gates, but before I may do that, I must ask each of you a single question." St. Peter turns to the first nun in the line and asks her, "Sister, have you ever touched a penis?" The sister responds, "Well, there was this one time that I sorta touched one with the tip of my pinky finger." St. Peter says, "All right, sister, now dip the tip of your pinky finger in the holy water and you may be admitted." And she did so. St. Peter now turns to the second nun and says, "Sister, have you ever touched a penis?" "Well, there was this one time that I held one for a moment." "All right, sister, now just wash your hands in the holy water and you may be admitted." And she does so. Now at this, there is a noise, a jostling in the line. It seems that one nun is trying to cut in front of another. St. Peter sees this and asks the nun, "Sister Susan, what is this?" There is no rush. Sister Susan responds, "Well, if I'm going to have to gargle this stuff, I'd rather do it before Sister Mary sticks her ass in it." The British Army found they had too many officers and decided to offer an early retirement bonus. They promised any officer who volunteered for retirement a bonus of £1,000 for every inch measured in a straight line between any 2 points in his body. The officer got to choose what those 2 points would be. The first officer who accepted asked that he be measured from the top of his head to the tip of his toes. He was measured at 6 feet and walked out with a bonus of £72,000. The second officer who accepted was a little smarter and asked to be measured from the tip of his outstretched hands to his toes. He walked out with £96,000. The third one was a non-commissioned officer, a grizzly old sergeant major who, when asked where he would like to be measured, replied, "From the tip of my p to my testicles." It was suggested by the pension man that he might want to reconsider, explaining about the nice big checks the previous 2 officers had received. But the old sergeant major insisted, and they decided to go along with him, providing the measurement was taken by a medical officer. The medical officer arrived at the barracks in the UK and instructed the sergeant major to drop him, which he did. The medical officer placed the tape measure on the tip of the sergeant's and began to work back. "Dear Lord," the medical officer suddenly exclaimed, "where are your balls?" The old sergeant major calmly replied, "Afghanistan." A guy walks into a fancy club and right past the bouncer. When the bouncer tries to stop him, the guy says, "Let me through, I'm rich." The bouncer, eager for a tip, lets him through. The guy proceeds right to the VIP section, past the ropes, and sits down at the best table. The bouncer tries to stop him again, but the guy says, "I can sit wherever I want, I'm rich." Again, the bouncer decides to let the guy sit down, still hoping for a big tip. The guy then walks behind the bar, grabs the most expensive top-shelf bottle, and takes it back to his table. The bouncer, realizing that the owner will fire him for letting a guest grab such an expensive bottle, stops the guy a third time and says, "I don't care how wealthy you are, you can't have that bottle." All of a sudden, a huge man, dwarfing the bouncer, taps him on the shoulder and tells the bouncer to let the guy keep the bottle. Indignant at the bold statement, the bouncer replies, "And who the hell are you?" "Rich." One day, A young man and woman were in their bedroom making love. All of a sudden, a bumblebee entered the bedroom window. As the young lady parted her legs, the bee entered her vagina. The woman started screaming, "Oh my God, help me! There's a bee in my vagina!" The husband immediately took her to the local doctor and explained the situation. The doctor thought for a moment and said, Tricky situation, but I have a solution to the problem if young sir would permit it." The husband, being very concerned, agreed that the doctor could use whatever method to get the bee out of his wife's vagina. The doctor said, "Okay, what I'm gonna do is rub some honey over the top of my penis and insert it into your wife's vagina. When I feel the bee getting closer to the tip of my penis, I shall withdraw it, and the bee should hopefully follow my penis out of your wife's vagina." The husband nodded and gave his approval. The young lady said, Yes, whatever, just get on with it." So the doctor, after covering the tip of his penis with honey, inserted it into the young lady's vagina. After a few gentle strokes, the doctor said, "I don't think the bee has noticed the honey yet. Perhaps I should go a bit deeper." So the doctor went deeper and deeper. After a while, the doctor began shafting the young lady very hard indeed. The young lady began to quiver with excitement. She began to moan and groan aloud. The doctor, concentrating very hard, looked like he was enjoying himself. He then put his hands on the young lady's breasts and started making loud noises. The husband at this point suddenly became very annoyed and shouted, "Now wait a minute! What the hell do you think you're doing?" The doctor, still concentrating, replied, "Change of plan. I'm gonna drown the bastard." A mom takes her daughter to the doctor. The doctor says, "Okay, what seems to be the problem?" The mother says, "It's my daughter Susie. She keeps getting these cravings. She's putting on weight and is sick most mornings." The doctor gives Susie a good examination and then turns to the mother and says, "Well, I don't know how to tell you this, but Susie is pregnant." About 4 months would be my guess. The mother says, "Pregnant? She can't be. She has never ever been left alone with a man. Have you, Susie?" Susie says, "No, Mom. I've never even kissed a man." The doctor walks over to the window and just stares out of it. A few moments later, the mother says, "Is there something wrong out there, doctor?" The doctor replies, "No, not really. It's just that the last time something like this happened, a star appeared in the east and 3 wise men came over the hill. I'll be damned if I'm going to miss it this time." A man walks into a bar and orders a whiskey. When the barman serves it up, he takes it out to the bench in front of the bar to drink it. As he's enjoying his drink, a nun walks by and glares at him sourly. "How can you pollute your soul with the devil's drink like that?" she asks. The man shrugs. "It's not the devil, it's just whiskey. But it's sinful and wicked. How do you know it's so bad then? Have you ever tasted whiskey?" "Of course not. My sisters and Mother Superior told me how evil drink is." "But how do they know? Have they ever had a drink?" They go back and forth like this for a while, before, at last, the nun relents. "Well, I suppose that if I were to try a sip of whiskey, I would better understand how it corrupts the soul. But it wouldn't do for any of my sisters to come by here and see me drinking. Could you order me one in a teacup?" The man agrees this is fair and walks inside to the barman. "2 whiskeys, but put one in a teacup, please." The barman slams his hand down on the bar and shouts, "Is that damn nun here again?" A radio station in Australia ran a phone in competition to find the most embarrassing moment in listeners' lives. The final 4 were 4th place. While in line at the bank one afternoon, my toddler decided to release some pent-up energy and started to run amok. I was able to grab hold of her arm after receiving looks of disgust from other patrons. I told her that if she didn't start behaving herself right now, she would be punished. To my horror, she looked me in the eye and said in a voice just as threatening, "If you don't let me go right now, I will tell Grandma that I saw you kissing Daddy's Willie last night." After this enlightening exchange, the silence was deafening. Even the tellers stopped doing what they were doing. I mustered the last of my dignity and walked out of the bank with my daughter in tow. The last thing that I heard as the doors closed behind me were screams of laughter. Third place. It was the day before my 18th birthday. I was living at home, but my parents had gone out for the evening, so I invited my girlfriend over for a romantic night alone. As we lay down in bed after making love, we heard the telephone ring downstairs. I suggested to my girlfriend that I give her a piggyback ride down to the phone. Since we didn't want to miss a call, we didn't have time to get dressed. When we got to the bottom of the stairs, the lights suddenly came on as a whole crowd of people yelled, "Surprise!" My entire family, parents, grandparents, uncles, aunts, cousins, as well as my friends, were standing there. My girlfriend and I were frozen in a state of shock and embarrassment for what seemed an eternity. Since then, no one in my family has planned any surprise parties. Second place. A lady picked up several items at a discount store. When she finally got to the checkout, she learned that one of the items had no price tag or barcode. The checkout girl got on the public address system, which boomed out across the store for everyone to hear. Price check for Tampax supersize? But it got worse. Someone at the rear of the store apparently misunderstood the word Tampax for thumbtacks and replied in a businesslike tone, his voice booming over the same public address system. "Do you want the kind that you push in with your thumb or the kind that you belt in with a hammer?" First place. And the winner is... This happened at a major Australian university during a biology lecture. A professor was discussing the high glucose levels found in semen. A young woman raised her hand and asked, "If I understand you correctly, you are saying that there is as much glucose in male semen as in sugar?" The professor responded yes by adding some statistical data. Raising her hand again, the girl asked, "Then why doesn't it taste sweet?" After a stunned silence, the whole class burst out laughing. The poor girl turned bright red, and as she realized exactly what she had inadvertently said, she picked up her books and without another word walked out of the class. However, as she was heading for the door, the professor's reply was a classic. Totally straight-faced, he answered her question. "It doesn't taste sweet, because the taste buds for sweetness are on the tip of your tongue and not at the back of your throat." A senior citizen took his brand-new Corvette out for a spin, feeling the wind through the last of his gray hair as he hit 80, then 100, then 120 on the interstate. But when flashing lights appeared in his rearview mirror, reality hit. He pulled over and waited. The state trooper approached and said, "Sir, my shift ends in 30 minutes. It's Friday. If you can give me a reason for speeding that I've never heard before, I'll let you go." The old man replied, "Years ago, my wife ran off with a state trooper." "I thought you were bringing her back." The trooper burst out laughing. "Have a good day, sir." A homophobic guy walks into a bar and immediately orders 3 double shots of whiskey. Bartender: "Wow, that's a hefty order." Guy: "Yeah, I just got terrible news that my brother has turned gay." Bartender gives the guy his 3 shots and leaves him alone. Next day, the same guy enters the bar and again orders the same drinks. Bartender: "Still not over your brother?" Guy: "No, even more bad news. I just found out that my father is now gay." Bartender looks shocked, but then just gives the man his drinks and leaves him alone. Next day. Again, the same guy enters the bar and orders his 3 shots. Bartender: "More bad news, I assume?" Guy: "Yep. Uncle this time?" Bartender shakes his head and gives the man his drinks. Next day, same guy, same drink order. This time, the bartender throws up his hands in disbelief. Bartender: "Does anybody in your family like women?" Guy: "Yep, my wife." A plane is flying to Toronto when a blonde in economy moves up and sits in first class. The flight attendant checks her ticket and says, "Ma'am, you paid for economy. Please return to your seat." The blonde replies, "I'm blonde, I'm beautiful, I'm going to Toronto, and I'm staying right here." The flight attendant tells the pilot and co-pilot about the situation. The co-pilot tries to explain, but the blonde repeats, "I'm blonde, I'm beautiful, I'm going to Toronto, and I'm staying right here." The pilot says, "She's blonde? I've got this, I speak blonde. I'm married to one." He walks over, whispers something in her ear, and she says, "Oh, I'm sorry," and returns to her seat in economy. Everyone is stunned. "What did you say to her?" they ask. He replies, "I told her first class isn't going to Toronto." A soldier ran up to a nun in the street. Panting for breath, he asked, "Please, can I hide under your habit? I'll explain later." The nun agreed to his request, and under he went. A few moments later, 2 military police ran up and asked, "Sister, have you seen a soldier around here?" The nun replied, "He ran down that way." After the MPs had ran off, the soldier crawled out from under her habit and said, "I can't thank you enough, sister. I hope you will understand. I don't want to go to Iraq." The nun said, "I understand completely, young man." The soldier added, "I hope I am not being rude, but you have a great pair of legs." The nun replied, "If you had looked a little higher, you would have seen a great pair of bollocks, too. I don't want to go to Iraq either." A farmer got pulled over by a state trooper for speeding, and the trooper started to lecture the farmer about his speed, and in general began to throw his weight around to try to make the farmer uncomfortable. Finally, the trooper got around to writing out the ticket, and as he was doing that, he kept swatting at some flies that were buzzing around his head. The farmer said, "Having some problems with circle flies there, are ya?" The trooper stopped writing the ticket and said, "Well, yeah, if that's what they are called. I never heard of circle flies." So the farmer says, "Well, circle flies are common on farms. See, they're called circle flies because they are almost always found circling around the back end of a horse." The trooper says, "Oh," and goes back to writing the ticket. Then, after a minute, he stops and says, "Hey, wait a minute. Are you trying to call me a horse's rear end?" The farmer says, "Oh no, officer. I have too much respect for law enforcement to even think about calling you such a name." The trooper says, "Well, that's a good thing," and goes back to writing the ticket. After a long pause, the farmer says, "Hard to fool them flies, though."